Hello and a very good evening to all of you. This is Sheetal, your verbal teacher, and you are watching Hitbullseye. And we are back again with yet another live related to your CUET preparation, your English, or your we can say your verbal section of the CUET exam. So as per the demand, we have come back with the continuation of literary devices. We did discuss some 5 to 6 literary devices in the last live. We will discuss some more in today's live. So without any further ado, let's begin with the video. Now first of all, before beginning it, tell me, what is literature? What do we mean by literature, poetry and prose? Yes guys, anyone? Right, so literature is the documentation of human experiences and feelings, and that too in a very aesthetic language, in a very aesthetic manner. So one thing you have to understand is literature has beautiful language. The purpose of literature or the poetry is to beautify language, and this beautification is done by usage of figures of speech and let's say literary devices, right? So let's see what kind of literary devices help in making the language of a poetry or prose beautiful. So some common literary devices are imagery, simile, metaphor, symbolism, personification, irony and paradox. So if you remember, we did imagery where some image is invoked to for a comparison to explain something. Some images are used, which is imagery. We did discuss up until, I believe, personification, yes, in the last slide. Simile and metaphor is comparison between two otherwise incongruous things, comparison between two unlikely things. Symbolism is again usage of symbol to convey some idea. Personification is attribution of human qualities to non-living things, like in Panchatantra story. Irony, paradox, these are the topics we will discuss in today's live. Juxtaposition, onomatopoeia, pun, alliteration, hyperbole, oxymoron and analogy. So we'll try to wind it up in today's live, but still if there are some literary devices which you still feel needs to be included in this live or maybe in an upcoming live, feel free to write it in the chat box. Anything that you want to see, you want to get help with, please write it in the chat box. Yes, moving on to the first literary device for today, which is irony. It is when a word or a phrase's literal meaning is the opposite of its figurative meaning. Many a times, but not always, irony is expressed with sarcasm. So what happens is, in irony, something has been said on the surface, but the depth or the reality of it is quite contrary to what has been shown or what has been said. And it is paired with sarcasm. Sarcasm is when you use humor to convey some message, that is known as sarcasm. Usage of humor in a very subtle way, in a taunting way. Okay, let's see an example. For example, maybe you eat a really bad cookie and then you say, wow, that was the best cookie I've ever had. But actually the person did not like the cookie at all. So this is an ironical situation. On the surface, the person is saying something else, but feeling something contrary to it. So of course, what you really mean is that it's the worst cookie you ever had, but being ironic actually emphasizes just how bad it was. So don't we just exaggerate things when we are being ironical, right? So this is the one such case. Moving on to the second literary device for today, which is hyperbole. Hyperbole is a figure of speech in which an author or speaker purposely and obviously exaggerates to an extreme. जिसे हिंदी में कहा जाता है बढ़ा चढ़ा कर बोलना, इंग्लिश में उसे हाइपरबली कहा जाता है, राइट? किसी चीज को एग्जैजरेट करके बताना. It is used for emphasis or as a way of making a description more creative and humorous. It is important to note that hyperbole is not meant to be taken literally. हाइपरबली में जो भी एग्जाम्पल या सिचुएशन या स्टेटमेंट दी जाती है उसका हम लिटरल मीनिंग नहीं ले सकते. उसका एक पर्पस है. सी whenever we use figurative language or we use literary devices, each and every literary device has a purpose. The purpose of emphasis, the purpose of conveying some idea, the purpose of beautifying the language, making it more amusing. So the audience knows it's an exaggeration. Exaggeration ऐसा नहीं है कि जिसमें सुनने वाले को कोई realization नहीं हो रही है कि बात बढ़ा चढ़ा कर कही गई है. On purpose words बहुत ही wordy language use की जाती है, pompous language या showy language use की जाती है to convey some idea, to make a point. Let's see examples of hyperbole. That suitcase weighed a ton. Can a suitcase weigh a ton? Think about it. इतना बड़ा साइज का कोई सूटकेस नहीं होता which can weigh a ton, right? तो ये हुआ एक केस हाइपरबली का. In this example, the speaker claims that a suitcase weighed a ton, 2,000 pounds. Of course, this does not mean that the suitcase literally weighed so much. So the speaker is using hyperbole in order to emphasize that the suitcase feels very heavy. That's it. He wanted to convey कि suitcase बहुत heavy feel कर रहा है. This is the reason he used the literary device hyperbole. Alright, let's see another very interesting literary device which is oxymoron. Oxymoron क्या होता है? An oxymoron is when you use two words together that have contradictory meanings. कोई भी दो वर्ड जिन्हें साथ में एक दूसरे के करस्पॉन्डिंग यूज़ किया जाए बट दोनों का मीनिंग ऑपोजिट हो या बिल्कुल कॉन्ट्ररी हो, ऐसे केस में उन वर्ड्स को हम कहते हैं, उन पेयर्स को हम कहते हैं ऑक्सीमोरॉन. सम कॉमन एग्जांपल्स इंक्लूड स्मॉल क्राउड. When you say crowd, it itself means that a mob of lot of people, a group of lot of people. So how can it be small? Crowd तो होती ही वो है जहाँ बहुत सारे लोग हों. So small crowd is one such example. Definitely possible. हम definitely भी कह रहे हैं, उसकी surety भी दिखा रहे हैं, साथ में हम possible भी कह रहे हैं. Again contradictory. Old news. News means something that is new around us, something that has been in headline. And when we say old, it becomes contrary, the two words. Little giant and so on. जो already some creature is being called giant, how can it be little? It's in itself giant. Yes, he can be a little giant in the category of all the giants, but if you see it on the surface, how can a giant be little? Right? So this again creates some sense of humor कि दो बहुत ही opposite चीज़ों को एक साथ एक पैर में रखा जाता है. Another example is bittersweet, right? Something which is bitter and sweet. We are using the two opposites in the same pair. For example, we say the pain was bittersweet, as in, yes, you do want the other person to inflict pain on you, but again, it's sweet. Somehow you want it and then you know it's bitter, it's toxic. So that is an example of bittersweet oxymoron. Moving on to the fourth literary device, which is analogy. An analogy is a literary technique in which two unrelated objects are compared for their shared qualities. Now, analogies is also an independent topic in vocabulary. Analogies, जब हम vocabulary point of view से बात करें तो उसमें दो word का comparison किया जाता है. कोई relation दो word के बीच में prominent होती है और उसके according हमें एक option ढूंढना होता है जिसमें similar kind of relationship use हुई हो. But here this analogy is a bit different. Meaning almost same है, but किसके ऊपर apply किया गया यहाँ पे analogy को? Analogy is a literary technique in which two unrelated objects are compared for their shared qualities. Not just words, it can be ideas and objects also. Unlike a simile or a metaphor, an analogy is not a figure of speech, though the three are often quite similar. Right? तो सिमिली और मेटाफर की तरह ये फिगर ऑफ स्पीच नहीं होता एनालॉजी. सिमिली और मेटाफर में हम क्लियरली दो चीज़ों को कंपेयर कर रहे होते हैं, बट वी यूज़ एनालॉजी टू prove some point of view or to clarify कि जो comparison हम कर रहे हैं, अगर आप उसे directly नहीं समझ पा रहे, let's try to convey it using another example. So that another example is drawing an analogy. Instead, analogies are strong rhetorical devices used to make rational argument and support ideas by showing connections and comparisons between dissimilar things. तो कुछ connections और similarities दिखाई जाती है किसी external example की, किसी भी चीज़ को या किसी भी idea को समझाने के लिए. So that is analogy for you. Let's see example 1. Every choice you make is like spinning the wheel of fortune. Sometimes you will get the result that you desire, while other times you will end up with something you always hoped to avoid. Wheel of fortune, यहाँ किन दो चीज़ों का comparison हुआ है? What is the issue at the hand? It is every choice you make. Choices को compare किया गया है. Choices are being compared to wheel of fortune. So this is drawing an analogy between the choices we make and rotating the wheel or spinning the wheel of fortune. Because when you spin the wheel of fortune, sometimes you end up with good things. You feel yourself the lucky one. Other times you might not end up with the good things, right? Same as with the choices. Sometimes your choices do work out, sometimes they don't. They fail badly. In the next example, raising children requires the same dedication you would give to garden. So what is this? Raising children or rearing the children is compared to gardening. See? Nurture them, feed them just as you have to nurture, take care of each and every plant, of soil, of environment, of temperature, of water, of nutrients. With the plants, similar is the case with the children. Nurture them, feed them, introduce them to both light and dark, and have patience. You have to show patience in both the situation, and soon you will see them grow in blooming wonders. Soon those plants, those flowers, those kids, they start budding if you take proper care. So here again, two things are compared. An analogy has been drawn between raising children and gardening. Analogies are more elaborate now. Further, elaborating this point that how analogies is different from simile or metaphor. So analogies are more elaborate and informational than similes or metaphors. In similes or metaphor, you may have two ideas, two objects, two subjects being compared, but analogies are elaborate. You compare completely two situations, providing support for the comparisons made rather than just stating them as simple truths. As you can see, the second example explains how children and gardens have similar qualities because they require similar growing conditions, right? Okay, moving on to the next one, which is irony. Irony, I believe you must have all heard. It's a literary device used when there is contradiction between what is said and what is really meant. So it may be an incongruity or contrast between reality and appearance. What appears and what really is are two different things. Different types of irony can be verbal, situational, and dramatic. So it can be irony of words, it can be irony of situation, it can be irony of it can be dramatic irony also. For example, when you are watching a play, you know what the result is going to be, but the character doesn't know. This is dramatic irony in drama. Example of this is, I am so clever that sometimes I don't understand a single word of what I am saying. If he doesn't understand himself, how is he clever? Isn't it ironical? Yes, this is a quotation by Oscar Wilde. Next example is, in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, the audience is aware. Now this is example of dramatic irony. In Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, the audience is aware that Juliet is not in fact dead. only drugged to appear in deep sleep. But Romeo, being the naive one, the innocent one who doesn't know the reality, he doesn't know the fact that she was indeed not dead, she was just drugged, she was just numb. And he kills himself. And what were the repercussions of this? When Juliet woke up, she again killed herself with the same poison. So this is irony. Sixth one, which is paradox. It's a figure of speech which shows a self-contradictory statement or situation. Again, two situations are given, they are self-contradictory but put in same sentence, right? Same context. A compressed paradox comprised of just a few words is called oxymoron. So there is just slight difference between these words. Do not get confused about it. Paradox take up two situations or two examples which juxtaposes each other, which are opposite of each other. But oxymoron mostly just have two words or two phrases, opposite phrases put together. Example of paradoxes: deep down you are really shallow. The person or anyone or anything that is shallow lacks depth. The very meaning of shallow is lack of depth. And how then can we say deep down? So there shouldn't be that depth, right? So this is paradox for you. Two opposing or two contradicting things are placed against each other. Men work together whether they work together or apart. So on the surface it seems as if this is an absurd statement, but trust me, mostly paradoxical situation or statement have a very deep meaning. Read it again and think about it. Men work together whether they work together or apart. So on this globe, be them working at the similar place or be them working individually at their native places, but as a whole the humanity, or let's say people, are working together. Everyone is working, right? All animals are equal. Now this is another example from Animal Farm, George Orwell's novel Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. How can we use these comparative words here? When we say equal, can we use comparatives with it? If we already have said that all animals are equal, how can some animals be more equal than the others? Another beautiful example of paradox. Alright, so the last literary term for today is onomatopoeia. Looking at the screen, you must be wondering what kind of pictures are these. Okay, so look at this. Boom, splat, slurp. Isn't that true that whichever word out of these three we are reading, it's almost sounding the same and we are almost imagining it in front of our eyes? When we say slurp, doesn't it make sound as if we are taking some soup and making the slurping sound, right? Similarly, boom, the sound as in which we refer, we use the word boom, is actually the same sound. It makes the sound of boom. Same is with splat. Right, examples of this are, first of all, not the example, let's see the meaning. A device used when a word used for a sound actually mimics that sound. Just by the sound you are able to understand what it is mimicking. Example is booing, goggle, clap, zap and pitter-patter. The booing of a spring, this is the example now. The booing of a spring, the clap of chalkboard erasers and the pitter-patter of rain falling on the pavement like tiny footsteps. Isn't it evoking all our senses? Isn't we actually feeling the words we are using, right? So that is what, and that is how literary devices beautifies a language. I hope this much was clear. For the next lecture, do let me know if you want explanation on any other literary devices. And what are we going to do next? We will take up some questions based on literary devices. Now that you know the meaning of almost all the literary devices, what I want from you is, when you come for next live based on literary devices and questions based on it, please go through these two videos, this one and the previous one where I started the topic of literary devices. It's gonna be highly beneficial to you. So that is all for today. That's a wrap for today. Thank you everyone, and all the very best for your preparation.